In the early days of his tenure, Donald Trump once again cast a shadow over Europe, threatening tariffs that could have serious consequences for both Germany and the United States. On March 27, 2025, resolute statements emanated from Berlin demonstrating a rejection of Washington's new customs policies, which were labeled protectionist, following the announcement of a 25% tariff on all passenger and cargo vehicle imports into the country. Germany, located in the heart of Europe with a rich history in automotive engineering and technological manufacturing, is a giant in international trade and a nation that has strengthened its economic power through years of close cooperation with the United States. Until recently, Germany sought to maintain a delicate diplomatic balance within the European Union. However, the news that the Trump administration's 25% tariffs on car imports were just the first step prompted Berlin to send an unequivocal signal to Washington. Should Germany's capabilities be underestimated, the response will be immediate and will deploy the full arsenal at its disposal. Notably, Germany was not alone this time. Almost simultaneously, France declared its readiness for a tough trade battle with the United States, providing additional impetus for the formation of a unified European position. American officials are likely beginning to realize the seriousness of the situation. Germany, as the industrial engine of Europe and one of the world's largest exporters of cars and machinery, possesses significant economic weight. Further escalation of the conflict could lead to an economic rift between Washington and Berlin unprecedented in recent decades. When a senior German government official stated that nothing can be ruled out, initial assumptions centered on possible taxes and restrictions on American technology giants. For a long time, Germany has shown restraint in its relations with European partners and has avoided open tariff confrontations with the United States. But this time, a statement from Berlin signaled a change in strategy. Retaliatory measures will not be limited to the automotive industry. They may encompass the technology sector, agriculture, and even digital services. This sounded like a decisive response to the Trump administration's threats of possible tariff increases, as if Germany were signaling its readiness for any eventuality. At the same time, signals from the German capital unequivocally hinted that Germany would not stand idly by if the United States imposed new duties on steel or high-tech products. Moreover, coordinated action with the European Union was being considered. Thus, the protectionist standoff that began 2 years ago with the automotive industry threatens to spill over into new areas such as electric vehicles, battery technologies, and even artificial intelligence-based software. Germany plays a key role in the European Union, serving as its economic engine. A significant portion of EU trade is centered around German products, especially in the automotive industry where brands like Mercedes, BMW, Audi, and Volkswagen are known worldwide. Millions of these cars can be found on the roads of the United States. By some estimates, German exports of cars and auto parts to the U.S. exceeded $35 billion by 2024. German machinery, equipment, chemical products, and high-tech devices also constitute a significant share. Germany is one of the largest suppliers to the American automotive market, but the introduction of 25% tariffs initiated by the Trump administration has seriously impacted this sector. When sales of German cars slowed down due to rising prices, the government in Berlin expressed its concern, emphasizing that such unilateral measures could not go unanswered. Moreover, on the morning of March 28, 2025, a representative of the German government announced its readiness to impose retaliatory duties on American cars, electronic products, and agricultural goods if necessary. Germany, as the locomotive of the European economy and a country at the forefront of many processes, represents a complex partner for the American administration. Major players in the European Union, such as France, Italy, and Spain, are increasingly talking about the possibility of developing a coordinated response to U.S. actions under the auspices of the European Commission. Highly indicative in this regard was the statement by the head of the European Commission, who regarded the American automotive tariffs as a direct attack against the European economy, to which the EU already has countermeasures ready. Reports suggest these measures may extend beyond the automotive industry, potentially affecting U.S. airlines or technology platforms. Such developments could create a significant imbalance in global trade. Amidst a looming trade war with Canada and the threat of retaliation from the massive European market, the stability of transatlantic trade between the U.S. and the EU, as well as trade relations between the U.S. and Canada, totaling an estimated $1.8 trillion, is at risk. There is a real danger of fragmenting these established economic ties. The Berlin administration's determination to include American tech giants in its tax policy has reignited the debate over the so-called digital services tax. Germany and France attempted to move in this direction several years ago, but their efforts were unsuccessful due to strong opposition from the United States. Today's approach can be summarized as follows. If the Trump administration imposes sanctions on the European automotive, steel, and energy sectors, European countries are free to act on digital taxation. This means that American social networks and e-commerce platforms may face additional financial burdens in the European market. However, retaliatory measures are unlikely to be limited to this. According to some reports, Germany is considering simultaneously introducing additional tariffs on American agricultural products, reducing import quotas, or enacting regulations that would complicate the operations of American manufacturers in Europe. Such steps could provoke discontent among American farmers, for whom the European market is strategically important. In the event of an escalation of the trade conflict, the Trump administration may face significant domestic pressure as Germany demonstrates its willingness to lead the resistance against American automotive tariffs. Berlin intends to take a principled stance, defending its interests at all levels of government. On March 27, 2025, the German finance minister declared a determination to protect the country's national interests, emphasizing that, despite the importance of the U.S. as a trading partner, the relationship must be equitable. In turn, the Minister of Economy warned Washington of the potentially devastating consequences of high tariffs for global trade. It appears that Germany is ready to abandon its traditional diplomatic restraint, which could create serious problems not only in trade negotiations but also in broader transatlantic relations. Despite the hopes of some American politicians that Trump will reconsider his position when faced with simultaneous pressure from the EU and Canada, the president is determined to stand his ground. Analysts predict that if Germany takes on the role of a locomotive and pulls the European Union out of the crisis, Canada may immediately respond with its own package of measures, creating immense pressure on the United States. Experts believe that the trade wars unleashed by Donald Trump could result in the loss of up to $1.8 trillion in trade transactions. The reduction in exports of German automotive and mechanical engineering equipment to the U.S. could leave tens of thousands of people unemployed on both sides of the Atlantic. Of course, such a scenario is undesirable for everyone, but political ambitions seem to overshadow economic expediency. This is what Berlin implies when it states that it excludes no options. If necessary, Germany is prepared to pay its price and respond symmetrically. German automotive giants are also keen to protect their own interests. If tariffs increase in the American market, companies such as BMW, Mercedes, and Audi may have to move some of their production to the U.S. However, even there, new tariffs could create difficulties in procuring necessary materials. Thus, the situation appears highly multifaceted and complex. In the labyrinths of the global economy, German business is sending mixed signals, on the one hand, imploring its own government not to respond too harshly to trade attacks, and on the other, appealing to the Trump administration to abolish unjustified tariffs. However, in German political circles, which have already sensed the winds of change after Merkel, a different opinion is brewing. Enough concessions. Germany has made enough gestures even if it threatens the loss of automotive giants. National honor and European interests come first, and Berlin is unwilling to compromise on this issue. Public opinion also leans towards this tough line. Relations with the U.S. are important but should not be a one-way street. This is the leitmotif resounding in the German capital. Following President Trump's imposition of a 25% tax on German automobiles on March 28, many Germans questioned in street interviews why they shouldn't retaliate. However, the European situation extends beyond Germany. France and Italy also find themselves in precarious positions. Increased American tariffs could significantly hinder their access to the massive U.S. market in vital sectors such as agriculture, luxury goods, and high technology. The impending trade battles threaten to particularly impact France, where iconic products like wine and cheese are vulnerable. Italy, in turn, risks feeling the consequences in the fashion and food industries. In response to these threats, French leadership is hardening its rhetoric, declaring the possibility of imposing retaliatory tariffs against American agricultural and cultural products. Berlin appears ready to support Paris in this confrontation, not excluding the possibility of developing a joint package of measures at the European Commission level. Behind the scenes, there is active discussion of including provisions on digital services taxes targeting American tech giants in this package. However, whether retaliatory measures could also affect other sectors such as American aerospace companies like Boeing or Silicon Valley startups remains an open question. Such a scenario could escalate the transatlantic crisis to a whole new level. If Canada joins these measures by reducing energy supplies and Europe increases pressure with digital taxes, the United States risks finding itself in a state of diplomatic isolation. German media, starting on March 27, is full of headlines reflecting the determination not to yield to pressure from Washington. In particular, it is emphasized that Germany showed patience when the U.S. imposed tariffs on steel and aluminum, but further escalation targeting the automotive industry is unacceptable. Behind the scenes, among German automakers from Mercedes to Volkswagen, voices are increasingly raised about the devastating consequences of American tariffs. Export figures are steadily falling and production lines are experiencing disruptions. Trade unions, sensing the impending threat, are taking people to the streets, demanding decisive action from the government. If America starts a trade war, Germany must not stand aside. Under such pressure, Berlin may be forced to take a tough response to Trump's actions. Behind the loud headlines about Germany's readiness to respond to tariffs with all available means lies growing tension. While outwardly maintaining calm, a storm is brewing within the country ready to descend upon the United States. Germany's leadership in Europe is threatened by Trump's threats to impose even tougher tariffs if the EU and Canada present a united front. It remains unclear how far Berlin is willing to go, whether it will be possible to maintain unity within the EU and to develop a coordinated strategy with Canada. However, judging by the escalating rhetoric, if Washington does not make a reasonable compromise, Germany may press the red button and impose retaliatory tariffs on both automobiles and products from American tech giants. Storm clouds are gathering on the horizon of the global economy. The escalation of trade conflicts threatens to turn into a real storm. Numerous examples from the past convincingly prove that there are no winners in trade wars. However, the Trump administration seems confident in the steadfastness of its position, believing that the United States, as a great power, cannot afford to lose. In response, Germany, one of the pillars of the European economy, declares its readiness to fight back, viewing the U.S. tariff policy as blatant aggression. France and other European countries, especially those closely linked to pan-European interests, are ready to support any actions aimed at protecting the European market. If such coordination is achieved, a significant portion of the colossal U.S. trade flow, estimated at $1.8 trillion, will be threatened. How should we assess the current situation? Experts are divided. Some believe that the prospect of retaliatory measures from Europe and Canada, whether coordinated actions or individual initiatives, will force the U.S. to return to the negotiating table. Others, on the contrary, are confident in Trump's firm determination not to back down, which is fraught with a serious economic crisis. One thing is clear: Germany does not intend to sacrifice its automotive sector, the cornerstone of the national economy, and the European Union is unlikely to leave its key partner in trouble. The headline, "Germany is ready to retaliate against Trump's tariffs using its entire arsenal," is not just a catchy phrase, but a reflection of the brewing reality. Berlin, relying on its impressive historical and economic potential, is challenging the United States, demanding serious consideration or retribution is inevitable. At the same time, Germany is becoming a catalyst for discussions about global leadership. The European Union, often criticized for its disunity, may find much-needed unity in the face of American policy. It remains to be seen whether Trump's strategy of dividing EU countries will succeed. However, a strong alliance between Germany and France leaves little hope for such a scenario. Many are now wondering whether American industrial, agricultural, and technological lobbies can influence their own government's policies. In the event of a full-scale response from Germany, American companies will face serious difficulties in the European market, which will inevitably trigger a wave of criticism against Trump at home. Moreover, if Canada joins these measures, the United States risks losing not only supplies of energy and components from the north, but also a significant share of the automotive and technology market in Europe. A complex game is unfolding on the political stage, where the stakes are higher than ever. Behind the scenes in Berlin, there is hope for a softening of American policy, but signals from across the ocean, especially statements from March 27, suggest otherwise. Donald Trump does not seem willing to compromise, openly declaring his readiness to escalate the trade war. "If you move against us, we will impose much higher tariffs." German analysts assessing the situation emphasize the interconnectedness of economies. There is such a huge trade flow, we pay the price together, but America loses more. The question many are asking is Trump really ready to take such a risk? The answer remains open. In this regard, a dilemma arises. How serious are Germany's intentions to resist Trump's tariffs? Is this just a tactical move ahead of negotiations, or a real willingness to engage in a tough confrontation? If Germany, as the engine of the European economy and an automotive giant, decides to strike at the American market, will this change Trump's position, or will he continue to stand his ground, demonstrating unwavering confidence in his rightness? Given Canada's involvement, the question arises about the possible consequences for the United States. Does the country risk losing a significant portion of its trade flow, estimated at $1.8 trillion? The situation remains tense, and the outcome of this trade duel is still impossible to predict. It is quite possible that in the finale of this tense confrontation, the parties will still sit down at the negotiating table to find a compromise solution. However, the current rhetoric of the parties is excessively harsh, which does not give grounds for optimism. Germany's anger, caused by U.S. trade policy, is finding increasing resonance in Europe, and the issue of stopping Washington's unilateral steps is likely to remain in the spotlight for a long time. In this war of nerves between the major players in world trade, Germany is becoming one of the key fronts. It remains to be hoped that at some point Washington will realize the danger and decide to retreat. Otherwise, the trade war risks causing irreparable damage to the global economy. The veil of the future still tightly conceals the coming events, but anticipation inevitably entails close interest. The denouement of this story will undoubtedly put everything in its place, and for now it remains only to trust the course of time and observe the development of events.